As an avid consumer of anime adapted from Shounen Jump, I've noticed this almost unspoken rule that seems to not be discussed at all when talking about Jump anime, at least not in the discussions that I take part in. And I feel the need to correct this issue since it's probably one of the most integral elements in adapting a Jump manga into a TV series. I call it the 2-to-1 rule, and to explain what it entails, let's take a look at arguably the most successful Shonen Jump adaptation of the past half-decade, My Hero Academia, which seems appropriate since the third season just started. The first 2 seasons of Hero Aka contain 38 episodes, which cover the first 69 chapters of the manga. And after a bit of math, we see that the chapter-to-episode ratio is 1.81 to 1. And if you remove the Froppy filler episode, the ratio rises to 1.86 to 1. While it's not a perfect example, it's still pretty close to what I mean when I talk about the 2-to-1 rule. A proper adaptation of a Shonen Jump manga should roughly follow a 2 chapters to 1 episode pattern in order to maintain the same pacing as the manga's source material. This isn't me saying that every episode should cover 2 chapters of the manga exactly, but rather that when taking the broader arc structure into consideration, this is approximately how things tend to play out in good adaptations. We can also dissect Hero Aka even further by analyzing it on a seasonal basis. Season 1 covered 21 chapters across 13 episodes, giving it a 1.62 to 1 ratio. This might account for at least part of the reason why Season 1, while still good, wasn't nearly as exciting and intense as the manga chapters that it covers. Season 2, however, covers 48 chapters across 25 episodes, giving it a 1.92 to 1 ratio, and if you remove the filler episode, it rises to an even 2 to 1, which goes along with the insane popularity garnered by the anime's second season. Insert anime awards joke here. And if Season 3 goes as I predict it will and end with the Hero License arc, it will cover 45 chapters across 25 episodes, giving it a respectable 1.8 to 1 ratio. And if we remove the filler episode that the season started out with, it rises even further to 1.88 to 1. That's not to say that this rule is absolute and infallible. There are plenty of anime adaptations of Jump manga that don't follow this rule and still turn out fine. Assassination Classroom, for example, covers 187 chapters across only 47 episodes, giving it a massive 3.98 to 1 ratio. Of course, S-Class's story structure is wildly different from that of Hero Aka since it has so many more self-contained stories that can be eliminated from the anime adaptation entirely since they're not crucial to the plot. However, when dealing with a traditional arc-based action-adventure Jump manga, the 2-to-1 rule holds pretty solid, and you can see many examples of anime that both succeed and fail at this idea. One of the most obvious examples of the latter can be found in the currently airing Black Clover adaptation, which at the time of writing this script somewhere around episode 20, is sluggishly moving along at an abysmal 1.1 to 1 ratio. Seriously, at one point this anime was adapting basically just a single chapter of manga per episode. That's just kind of unacceptable. And the issue is further accentuated by what I've mentioned in a previous video as the Black Clover manga's biggest strength, its blisteringly fast pace. By removing a fundamental element of what makes the manga so enjoyable to read, the anime has essentially shot itself in the foot and is now hobbling along as best it can because Studio Pierrot and TV Tokyo are filled with incompetent, money-grubbing morons. Most of the time, however, the effects aren't nearly as obvious as in these examples, especially when dealing with older Jump adaptations. This time, let's take a look at one of the most popular Jump franchises of all time, Dragon Ball. With the original Dragon Ball's 153 episodes and Z's 291, we get a combined total of 444 episodes. And when we spread the manga's approximately 520 chapters across those 444 episodes, we get a ratio of 1.17 to 1, an extremely slow pace. Going further, like we did with Hero Aka, we can also see a significant difference in the adaptation of the original series versus the Z adaptation. The OG Dragon Ball portion of the manga contains 194 chapters covered across 153 episodes, giving it a 1.27 to 1 adaptation rate. Nowhere near the preferred 2 to 1, but not completely horrible either. Z, meanwhile, covers 325 chapters across 291 episodes, giving it a 1.12 to 1 adaptation rate, just barely higher than Black Clover. Of course, both Z and the original Dragon Ball had one major issue that we actually don't see a lot in modern Jump adaptations, and I only briefly touched on earlier: filler. In an era when there are hardly any new manga adaptations that run forever without taking seasonal breaks, the use of filler when the anime catches up too far to the manga has mostly disappeared. But back in the day, or in some cases 3 years ago, it was a major issue that seriously hampered the reputation of a series. And we can see this problem almost disappear entirely when we take a look at Dragon Ball Z Kai, the readaptation of the Z Saga. If we compare Z's 325 chapters against Kai's 159 episodes, we get an adaptation rate of 2.04 to 1, lining up almost exactly with the 2 to 1 rule. Does that make Kai superior to the original? Well, not necessarily. Kai has a lot of its own issues as well in terms of how certain scenes are constructed, and to a certain extent I'd even argue that being long and drawn out was part of Z's appeal in the first place, making it feel much more epic and grand in scale. I also haven't watched either of them, or the original series for that matter, in over half a decade, so I can't say for sure which one is the better adaptation. Before we conclude, I also want to point out that I find the case of Naruto to be one of the most bizarre out of all of these adaptations. As it stands, Naruto's 700 chapters spread across 720 anime episodes actually has an adaptation rate of less than 1 chapter per episode. However, if you remove all of the filler and all of the episodes that adapt side story novels, the rate drastically increases to 1.8 to 1, roughly the same as Hiroaka. It's kind of fascinating to me how extreme the difference is when you remove filler from a long-running series. In the end, as I mentioned earlier, the 2 to 1 rule is not so much a hard and fast law that automatically makes a Jump adaptation good or bad, but it is still a strong indicator of whether it retains the pacing of its manga source material, and, more importantly, whether it's an adaptation worthy of your time. Thanks for watching, everyone. This was another idea that I've been sitting on for a while and I finally managed to put into video form, so hopefully you enjoyed my thoughts on this concept. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all my latest content. Special thanks to Jan Rogalski, Rourke Tenjoin, Kushina Minami, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.